In a lab environment, we are going to want several machines that we can work with, both as attack machines and also victims, the machines we're going to attempt to discover and potentially compromise. So in addition to machines that may be fully patched and ready to go, we also want to stack the deck and make sure we have some machines that are fairly easy to exploit as well, so we can see some measurable results with our tools. One of those tools that we can use is a virtual machine called Metasploitable. Now, Metasploit is a fascinating attack tool, a suite of tools actually, that we're going to cover in more detail in this course. And now, in preparation for that, we're going to download a virtual machine for Metasploitable 2 and make it part of our lab. So there's two basic steps. Number one, we want to download it from sourceforge.net. We want to configure it to put it on the right network, and then make sure it's up and running, and we'll also snapshot it so we can restore it back to its original state if we need to. Let's download Metasploitable 2. And one easy way of doing that is to type in Metasploitable 2, and I'm also going to narrow it down to the site where we want to download it from. And I'm going to type in site:/sourceforge.net and press enter. As we do this narrowing down to a certain site, if you think that's a pretty cool tool inside of Google, oh my gosh, there are so many cool quote-unquote hacks that we can do as part of Google searches, and we'll have separate nuggets just on that. And here, my friend, is the download that we want to get right now. It's Metasploitable 2 at sourceforge.net, so we'll go ahead and click on this link. We can also see up here that we have HTTPS in use. We're at sourceforge.net. Those are all good indicators. There's a readme.txt file along with the actual downloaded zip file, and I'm just going to click on this link right here for the latest version. So we'll click on download, and it is on its way right here. So Metasploitable is a flavor of Ubuntu Linux that intentionally contains many vulnerabilities. And so it's great for testing and verifying that our tools are working. And once again, it's just nice to have a little bit of low-hanging fruit in our lab environment so we can readily verify our tools. Also, we might want to throw in some older Windows machines, for example. If you throw in Windows XP, that has tons and tons of vulnerabilities built in if you don't apply the updates and patches. Windows 8, without the updates and patches, has lots of vulnerabilities as well. Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2012, without the updates and patches, has many, many vulnerabilities as well. And so here's the downloaded .zip file from Metasploitable version 2.0. And I have it sitting in a folder on my file system. And I'm simply going to go ahead and unzip this file, and then we'll deploy that virtual machine. So to do that, I'm going to right click. I'm going to select Extract All. This is using the Windows native unzip tool. And then I'm going to browse to the location where I want to put this VM. I'm going to select that, and then we'll click on Make New Folder, and we'll call this Metasploitable 2 as the destination folder for the unzipping, and we'll click on OK. And then we'll go ahead and click on Extract to start the extraction process. So now that that's done, let's go into that folder. Here's the VMX file, the descriptor file for that virtual machine. We'll go ahead and double click on it. And on my host computer, because I have VMware Workstation installed, that virtual machine now shows up here. Now, before we fire up this bad boy, let's also configure the networking portion of it. So with the Metasploitable VM selected, we'll go over here to the network adapter, click on it. That brings up the VM settings, and let's go ahead and also put the network adapter on VMnet 0, which is bridged over to my physical/wireless network, which is the 192.168.1 subnet. And we'll click on OK. And also, just to make sure it's working, let's go ahead and select it, and we'll power on that virtual machine by clicking one of the green arrows that shows up here with that machine selected. So we'll power it on. I just want to verify that it comes up. It's asking me if did I copy it or did I move it. I'm going to say I moved it, and that way it won't attempt to change layer 2 information for the Ethernet adapter and so forth. So it's now booting up. And it indicates right here if we want to log on, we log on with the username of msfadmin and the password of msfadmin to get started. So let's log in to make sure we're good to go. So we'll log in as msfadmin with the password of msfadmin. And here's giving us a heads up in Ubuntu of how we're going to run an application as administrator using the sudo command. And we'll include additional tips and tricks and basic functionality regarding Linux commands as we continue through this course. So just to verify our IP information, if we do an ifconfig here and press enter, look at that, that looks pretty good. We have an IPv4 address of .61 that we picked up from my DHCP server on the 192.168.1 subnet. And we have an IPv6 address as well, which I'm not using in my network. And it's also pretty helpful from an attack perspective. If a customer or a host has a protocol stack running, like IPv6, they don't even know it's running or aren't aware that it's running. That's just another attack vector that we can use to go ahead and discover and potentially compromise that virtual machine or that host. And just for grins, let's do a ping of www.google.com. And that's going to verify several things for us. Oh, that's great. I'll do a Control-C to stop that. That verifies that name resolution is working, DNS, because it translated google.com over to this IP address. And because the pings are successful, it's also indicating that we have internet connectivity through the router that's sitting at 192.168.1.1. That's fantastic. One other thing I'd love to do is go ahead and power off this virtual machine and then take a snapshot in VMware Workstation if we need to return to this state. Now, currently my mouse and cursor are kind of stuck inside of this virtual machine. To get it out over here to the console and to the controls in the Windows host computer, we can do a Control-Alt on the keyboard, and that should release our mouse. Also, the fact that it doesn't release the mouse automatically is a good indicator that VMware Tools is not installed as part of this virtual machine. So if you're working with some virtual machines and you take your mouse and you move it from here, for example, and you move it over here and it just goes between console and the host computer no problem, that's because the virtual machine has a thing called VMware Tools installed as part of that virtual machine. Also, if we have VMware Tools as part of a virtual machine, if we right-click on that virtual machine and go to Power and select Shut Down Guest, that will perform a graceful shutdown of that virtual machine, courtesy of the VMware Tools that's facilitating that shutdown. However, in an environment where the virtual machine does not have VMware Tools, the shutdown guest is pretty much the equivalent of a power off. We're just cutting the power to the virtual machine. And it's really not a good idea to just pull the power from a system, including a virtual machine, because it could leave files and configurations in an unknown state. So in the event, like on this Metasploitable 2 virtual machine where it doesn't have VMware Tools installed, the proper thing to do before we snapshot this virtual machine would be to gracefully shut it down. And to do that, here in this Ubuntu flavor of Linux, we can type in sudo that allows us to run commands as an administrator and the command power off and press enter. It's going to ask us for the password for msfadmin, so we'll supply it. It is msfadmin. We'll press enter, and that's going to go ahead and stop all the services and shut down the power. Or at least that's what I hope it's going to do. On some flavors of Linux, you can use the command shutdown-h for halt or shutdown-p for power off, capital P, and also schedule a time when you want it to happen. So for example, if you want to shut down now, you could use the command shutdown-h space now, and that would give us similar results as we have right here. Now, the concerning part, just a little bit, I see that everything's been shut down and stopped, and the system's been halted, which is great. But if you notice up here, from a VMware Workstation perspective, VMware Workstation still thinks that VM is running. So because the virtual machine itself thinks it's all halted and powered off, we could now safely go over here to VMware Workstation, go to the power menu, and simply say shutdown guest. And we're not at risk of having open files and half-baked configurations on that virtual machine because it logically shut itself down. I would feel better if VMware Workstation also felt that that VM was off by itself, but sometimes we have to take what we can get. So now with this virtual machine powered off, I'm going to go ahead and go up to the Snapshot Manager, which is this icon right here, or we could right-click, and from the Snapshot menu, we could go to Snapshot Manager, and I'm going to go ahead and take a snapshot. So to take a snapshot, we'll click on Take Snapshot, and let's title this Before Hacks and Attacks. And we could also put in the description other details regarding what this snapshot represents, and that way we can go back to it if we want to. So we'll go ahead and click on Take Snapshot, and now we have that snapshot right here, and we'll close that dialog window. In this nugget, we've downloaded and deployed Metasploitable as a virtual machine that we can leverage and use as part of our lab environment. We specified in the networking details where we wanted that virtual machine to connect to. In our case, I connected it to my 192.168.1 network through the logical VMnet 0 network connection in VMware Workstation. And we also powered off that virtual machine and we made a snapshot of it in VMware Workstation. And my friend, my intention is for you to also include this virtual machine as part of your lab. So that way, when we're working through the labs together and we're doing attacks and discovery and reconnaissance, you can have the benefit of not only seeing it happen, but also doing the hands-on practice right alongside me. I'm glad you joined me for this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.